To the homeless solution.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Geez, you know, I rarely missed a little quip at the start, but I don't even know what I meant by that. So welcome in. You know, we live tape on this show, so it's like, all right, Dan, you're on. A remedy for the homeless: challenge, problem, crisis, debacle, all of those things from last year. Can we agree that we can't repeat what we had last year? I will tell you that I've had a handful of conversations here and on the radio with homeless solution man, housing secretary, Stefan Pryor, and I will tell you that I think he might got it. I think he may have it. You know what it is? I think the lights are too hot here in the studio today because I'm all aflutter. But really happy to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. A couple of things. Maybe it's the news of the day that's got us all flustered. Now, we're taping on Thursday. You see this on Friday in the evening on Fox, of course, and on Sunday. By this time, this will have changed. In fact, the headlines we were looking at changed 3 times before we started today. I have nothing deep to say about this other than I am hopeful that this awful, unspeakable, despicable evidence of some level of human condition that is just evil will not result in the same arguments back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I just don't know how we get out of this cycle. I just don't know. I know this, that we had comprehensive conversations on this platform and on the radio show on WPRI weekdays 3 to 6 about red flag laws, and it was that conversation on the air that inspired an executive order from the governor. She may not admit that at this point. This is the former governor, Gina Raimondo. Remember her? Check 60 Minutes for the latest on that. She got an interview. I think something's going on. Maybe my guest knows something about that. Anyway, in all seriousness, the Attorney General, the Police Chiefs Association all reacted to what was a really common sense conversation about mental health issues being completely reviewed before people are able to either buy or retain their guns. And if Maine is a yellow flag state, so their restrictions are lesser than we have here in Rhode Island. But the gun protectors, the Second Amendment protectors will tell you that it's all about mental health. Others will tell you it's all about the machine. And all I'm saying is we gotta just share some notes back and forth together. We don't know enough about this alleged assailant. Maybe you do by now, by the time you've seen this show. But it appears that it fits in to this category of flag. So we got to do better. You know, on both sides, or all 17 sides of the aisle here on the conversation. Speaking of the aisle, there's someone to manage it finally. In Washington, we have a House Speaker. We'll do more on this over the course of the next few shows. It was ridiculous that the Republicans put themselves in this jam and could barely get out. We get a guy that nobody knows, but who believes that Joe Biden wasn't elected duly. Isn't that just terrific? We'll see if the guy kind of homogenizes his approach. If he doesn't, he will serve up 2024 for the Democrats. No doubt about it. All right, that's all I've got. I just had to get those things off my chest because those are the news stories that are on top of us as we speak. But a couple of days ago, I said, hey, listen, we should get the housing secretary back here to talk about some really important planning that he and the administration have done to try to get ahead of this homeless thing. Here is a headline that kind of reflects some of it. The governor sat with the housing secretary just a handful of days ago.
There's no perfect solution to this, otherwise this would be done. If it was easy, it would be done. in a way that addresses every issue. Again, we're going to do our best, and we're asking others to do their best.
It's interesting as you stand there, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining me. The governor is generally a little bit more affable than that. I mean, we catch him in a moment of concentration, but he understands the seriousness of the situation. Not just what's in front of us now, but recovering from what happened last year, and fixing a problem that he cannot afford to have practically hanging over his head or politically hanging over his head. Do you agree?
I do. It's the combination. By doing better policy-wise in terms of a remedy, I think it helps to solve the politics. But it's been a tough going. Now listen, across the whole country, Dan, you know this, homelessness is up. Part of this is because the federal government had an eviction moratorium that during COVID that was for public health reasons and then went away, and people who were at the edge of homelessness became homeless. And there's other factors that related to COVID and the tightness of the housing market, not only in New England, but in the United States. So Rhode Island is a function of all of that. And the governor is surrounded with these complexities. And to his great credit, we're working through them. How are we working through them? We have a three-part approach right now. It's collaboration, it's prevention, and it's expansion. On the collaboration front, very quickly, we can get to any level of depth that you wish. It is your show, sir. We're working with cities and towns to ask them and to let them guide us. Where should we open new homeless shelters?
Oh, and I'm sure they're running to. Oh, Mr. Secretary.
Well, you know,
let me tell you how many places you can put all these folks.
Well, you know what is interesting is there is an understanding, not every single place, but there's an understanding statewide that it is a necessity that we do better. And if we don't do it, we get encampments. If we don't do it, we all see folks on the streets. Many of us have family members or friends who are at the risk of homelessness or maybe out there. We're also working with faith communities, another form of partnership under this collaboration. Churches, synagogues, and mosques are stepping up to help us. So that's the collaboration part of it. The prevention part of it is trying to avoid eviction altogether, and we can get into that if you wish. Very, very important. And then there's the expansion of shelter, and we can get into any depth on that. The governor has said to us, make sure that we have a comprehensive approach, that we use dollars efficiently and effectively, and that we have places for folks who want to come in from out of the cold to go.
All right, so a couple of things to corroborate the story here. I just talked to a friend of mine who traveled to another city who said he couldn't believe the homeless situation, a southern city. You look at a story today, I believe, in the Boston Globe, as I'm recording this on Thursday, about a homeless encampment challenge on Mass Ave.
Mass and Cass.
Mass and Cass. So this is not your unique challenge, but it dominated our news cycle last year when the State House became the major encampment. It was symbolic of a societal fall down that is just, it became front and center. And you were not on board as the housing secretary at that point. But I think the governor would have to admit that the administration was kind of caught flat-footed. And to its credit, a change of the guard in the housing secretariat, which, by the way, is a brand new position.
It is.
You are both, I'm guessing that you were simultaneously formatting a long-term, matrix for what this job should be while you've got to solve this particular short-term problem.
Correct.
So I know you got a lot on your plate, but we talk about, actually, why don't we pause, because it's going to take a couple of minutes. When we come back, we'll talk about, again, why this thing is happening, the push down of economics that have created this thing, and then we'll get into the specific plan for this winter on the Homeless Challenge. Stay with us.
Today, as faith leaders, we stand as one, dedicated to the common call that runs through all our faith traditions, to give aid to those who are most in need, to provide for those who are seeking shelter, and to work towards the goal of giving to those who are seeking what we all truly wish, a home.
You know, Monsignor says it beautifully. You know, my own comment here, by the way, the Catholic Church ought to be doing more of this marketing than it is getting embroiled in all the stuff that we get embroiled in from time to time, because it shows, I think, the heart of Jesus, the Church, in the right relationship. I know you've got like more partners this year.
Yes.
And you feel good about that. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But before we do, let's review. It's kind of like, okay, class, because you and I do this all the time
right.
now. We talk about why this is a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Economy, weird, COVID, inflation, a real estate market that exploded, and prices went through the roof. Now we have a kind of a top out of that, but not much of a reduction in housing prices, but we have interest rates to combat inflation
That's
that
right.
have risen, which have kept people who are either looking for new homes or looking to downsize from their already perhaps lesser mortgaged or paid off homes not moving anywhere.
Correct.
Keeping what we would call the workforce of middle income, middle America, the heart of America, teachers, nurses, police, fire, 10,000 categories of workers who make modest incomes but respectable incomes in a place where maybe they can't buy yet.
Right.
So they're staying in their rental units.
Yes.
The availability of those rental units becomes lesser and the rent goes higher. People who are on the lower end of that can't afford that rent anymore.
That's right.
And they become eligible for the programmatical, already in place housing issues. Squeezing down those folks who may have been, for lack of a better term, graduating up from shelters to those programs, leaving the shelters in an even more capacitated place. And then we have, and I don't want to say this from a human point of view, but from an economic class point of view, the folks at the lower end of the scale stuck and intense, or wherever they are.
Or even crowded out of the market. And
Right.
in some cases pushed onto the street.
Right.
And that's what it is. You're exactly right. Up and down the market.
So you
Rhode
can't
Islanders are
fix
not-
all of those. It would be a mistake for you to try to fix all of those things. You need you need to add a solution for the reality that exists.
That's right. Although
You can't change
there
the
is a
economy.
common thread. There is a common thread, Dan. It's that we need more housing production. And we need to work with cities and towns as partners to get housing built where there's opportunity and where municipalities think it ought to be. And there are instances where there's tracts of land that don't have water and sewer but could with that last mile connection, where there are other utilities that need to be placed there, where there's a roadway that would light up that location. So we're working on that. We have a new infrastructure fund under Governor McKee with the General Assembly's partnership that's going to let us do some of that, and we're going to prove whether that helps. We're also helping to build out municipal capacity. We're offering fellows to cities and towns that don't have planners or don't have development officials in any form. So the point is, we're helping them getting it going, and this applies up and down the income ladder, up and down the price matrix. We're going to try to get some housing built, but as I think you're implying, we also need to fix the central problem. We need to take aim at the worst aspects of the problem, which is where we need the housing to be most affordable, which is folks of lesser means and people who are experiencing homelessness, who are getting crowded out. And that's why we're doing these specific solutions, and we're looking as to homelessness for this winter for real answers.
And I want to talk about some of that. But in your role as a housing secretary, and while I'm suggesting you can't control the economy, what are experts telling you, though, about what the projection is for the current real estate market? Everything I read indicates that this thing isn't going to budge for a while. It's kind of that storm that just sits over and says it's going to be 7 or 8 or 10 days. This could be 7 or 8 or 10 years in terms of just a high cost of living, maybe coupled with what today we consider to be high interest rates. I mean, I laugh. I took a look at one of my parents' interest rates back, I took out the old documents and saw 14 and 15 and 16% interest rates for mortgages. And when it went down to 7 or 8, they thought it was the best thing they've ever had.
Right, exactly.
Right? We are now up to 7 or 8, but because we were at 1 and 2 and 3,
changes your perspective
completely. But are you getting any
Yes.
any expertise as to what the trend might
Well,
be?
it's dependent upon the factors that you mentioned. Yes, but people don't know is what it comes down to. I could tell you there's
Crystal
this, but
balls
there's
are
that.
cheap, right?
But I will tell you some crystal balls are cheap. But I will say this: there are a couple factors that are very important. Inflation, you pointed it out already. Where is it going? Does it merely stabilize? Does it merely only increase at a reasonable rate, a more reasonable rate? Or do we actually see interest rates
But I'm not sure the
fall?
inflation that we're dealing with at the grocery store has any kind of direct relationship to the housing market.
Well, the interest rate component
Obviously, that does.
affects purchasing.
Right.
So there's that. So that how does all of that stabilize inflation and interest rate and how they interact? The other piece of it is this is more in urban centers, it's more in cities. There's a crisis in America regarding commercial office space. Remote work has caused the near collapse of some of the office markets in our metropolitan areas.
Which might be a bonus for you.
Might be a bonus in that in the national market and very much in the Rhode Island market, you could see conversions. Conversions could add supply and could bring some stability and some rationality to the housing
The
market.
people who own those kind of buildings aren't going to want, they're going to want fancy conversion. They're not going to want...
In some cases,
right?
In some cases, part of the vocabulary of this is Class C office space, meaning the older stuff
Okay.
that's on top of retail in not necessarily the premier parts of a central business district. And in those spaces, you might do workforce housing, you might do affordable housing, and frankly, even in larger office complex, if there are tax credits and if there are subsidies to invest to write down the for sale or rental rates for housing, you could build affordable units in like an 80-20 way, meaning 20% of the units. So it could help.
All right. When we come back, specifically, what are we doing for the homeless situation this cold season? Stay with us. So here's something that you probably can't read, but it's evidence that there is a strategy. Okay, expansion and prevention. I will tell you, in lieu of, and notwithstanding that, we have to wait for the proof of success of the strategy. I'd be the first person to bust your horns. You know that if I thought there was an empty look at this whole thing.
Yes.
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I am. I'm impressed. I don't know how to pick it apart, so give me a couple of minutes of what is going to prevent not just the scenes of a homeless problem,
Right.
but the lives of those folks. Everybody who wants some shelter, how are they going to be able to get it?
They're going to be able to get it.
And give me the short version.
Yeah, the short version is that we're opening up new shelters. So we've kept the baseline number of beds, the bed strength, if you will, from last winter, stable. So we're at about 1,156 beds right now. We're going to go up to 1,370. So
Booked.
yes, we're booked, meaning we have the
church is
providers, we
helping.
have the locations.
The Monsignor, the diocese helping, others are helping.
Yes.
You're booked at that level.
We are. Now, even booked, could there be a problem with the plumbing at a given location? Could the politics get more complicated than even we think it's worked out now? Yes. So we have backup stuff. So in the pipeline, we have hundreds more beds, actually. And not all of those will work out either. But my point is that we've created a process where swap that in, push that into action. So we're in good shape, and we're opening up stuff in different places. It's not concentrated in any one
That's
city.
my question. It's not just Providence is the
Yes.
hub of the homeless.
That's correct. We do have new sites in Providence. Speaking of the Catholic Diocese, bless them. They're expanding by 41 beds at Emmanuel House in Providence, so it's fantastic. They are also opening up 15 new beds in Woonsocket at Holy Family Vestry at a brand new site. So this is exactly what's happening as a result of these partnerships, to the credit of our partners.
Right.
And there's more in the pipeline.
We're going to get a little bit more transparency from the coalition and homelessness, so that we don't have the situation where they say, hey, boy, we've got a whole bunch of encampments all throughout the state, but I can't tell you where they are. And the governor's out there driving around literally trying to meet people that he can't find. We have to have a bigger conversation about too many cooks in the kitchen. I saw you do a seminar with the legislators the other day. We talked about it on the radio.
Yes.
I was thinking, you know what? There's a lot of territorial discussion going on here. The agency
no
of
doubt
this
about it.
and the director of that, and the coalition for this, and the conglomeration of that. There's a lot of components of what you have said
There
is
is.
one of the worst housing structures in America.
It's true. Now, in fairness to all of them,
and I only got a minute, so give me a capsule
they were
on
what
that.
we had when there was no housing department.
Sure.
So under Governor McKee, we've created a housing
Quasis,
department.
private organizations,
Right. Rhode Island Housing.
a mosaic of groups.
With a whole bunch of mechanisms and programs and doing good stuff. And these different, there's a continuum of care, and there's a Housing Resources Commission. They've all been doing their best to carry the burden to make it happen. Now we have a coordinating entity, a department. Now we're getting going. So we should think about, how should this all work? Do we need all of these? Do we need to strengthen some of these? So these are questions we need to have. But I will tell you, I'm encouraged. The coalition has no new leadership, actually has new leadership. They've been very receptive. We're trying to think about what are the things we can work on together. Very similar to how we're working with cities and towns. What are the things we can work on together to make things better? You know, it's all got to be in service of helping the most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. It's all got to be about ensuring that during the winter people have a place to go that's warm and safe.
Got it. And I guess we can't make predictions, but on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being a perfect winter this way, what's your projection? What's your feel-good number?
Well, you made the point about crystal balls. It's impossible to know, but I'll say this. It's impossible to know because we could have a very severe winter. In the United States of America, homelessness could increase more than we expect. There are variables. But I think that we're on the upper end of that scale with our level of preparation, hundreds of beds higher, with prevention stuff going on, with problem-solving resources to help people stay in their homes.
Right.
All of that.
Appreciate the work.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. Final word from Mike from that statements. One key will be the McKee administration marketing the solutions, and that's why we have the housing secretary here. You got to know where the shelter is to find the shelter, so pay attention and go to the housing website, and we'll stay in touch with it on the radio as well. You have a great night. See ya.